Hi, good morning. Hello, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us for today's webinar on finance for national adaptation plan processes. What can we learn from countries' national adaptation plans? My name is Christian Ledwell, and I'm the Knowledge Manager for the NAP Global Network. So just before we begin, just a few housekeeping points. So today's session is going to be 60 minutes long, including a question and answer section at the end. Please feel free to say hello and introduce yourself. Just drop your name and your affiliation in the chat box. We will be recording today's session, and we will share the video and slides with everyone after the webinar. And we do have simultaneous translation available today in French and Spanish, and you can turn translation on using the icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you have any questions, comments, or technical issues, please just drop us a line in the chat box. And so today's webinar is brought to you by the NAP Global Network. And in case you're not familiar with the network, we were established in 2014 to support developing countries to advance their NAP processes and to help accelerate adaptation efforts around the world. To achieve this, the network facilitates South-South peer learning and exchange on the NAP process. We support national level technical action on NAP processes. And across our engagement with partner countries, we aim to generate, synthesize, and share knowledge on what makes for effective and inclusive national adaptation planning. So today we'll be hearing from Maribel Hernandez, who is a senior policy advisor on adaptation finance with the NAP Global Network Secretariat, and the lead author of our new publication on analyzing finance and national adaptation plans. And we're also lucky to be joined by Thomas Lerenten Lelekoitien, who is Deputy Director of Climate Change Adaptation with Kenya's Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. He'll be sharing a look at Kenya's experience with NAP finance, including Kenya's county climate change funds. And so we'll start with a presentation by Maribel. Maribel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. So here we're going to share with you some key takeaways of this review of the NAP documents from a financial perspective, where we tried to identify good practice and also, of course, some challenges in financing adaptation as reflected in the NAP document, and of course, discuss some recommendations for strengthening finance in NAP processes. Next, please. So the methodology we used is to review this 59 multi-sector NAP documents. So we analyzed the ones that were submitted to the UNFCCC by the end of February 2025. And we developed a questionnaire and some keywords that we submitted to a program called Max QDA that help us do the analysis of how NAP documents were reflecting different aspects of adaptation finance in there. And we completed this review with the experience and the knowledge that we have acquired through our support, the NAP Global Network support since we started on 2014. The key areas of focus for this review are financing in NAP documents, so how finance have been addressed in these documents, prioritization of adaptation options and costing of these adaptation measures, the sources and financial instruments that are mentioned in the document, the integration of climate change adaptation consideration in budgeting systems, and then some barriers to unlock adaptation finance for NAP processes and some operational next steps. Next, please. Yeah, so let's start from the beginning. So the first area that we had a look at when we reviewed the 59 NAP documents was how these documents were addressing adaptation finance. And what we've noticed is that the majority of the NAP documents include a chapter or a separate section dedicated to financing adaptation. And 41 of them refer to a separate document, a separate financing strategy or separate resource mobilization strategy, whether it is already alive or just mentioning that a separate financing strategy would be needed, would be nice to have, etc. So referring to these issues. So adaptation finance clearly identified as a specific issue in NAP documents. Next, please. And then on the prioritization aspects, we know that prioritization is essential because it helps identify the most urgent and impactful adaptation options where the country's limited financial resources should be allocated to. And what we see is that all the NAP documents identify adaptation priorities, although as we would see later, sometimes it's sort of high-level adaptation priorities that are identified, but they categorize them in different ways. What we see more often is that the NAPs organize the priority adaptation options by sector, and then they complement that by some cross-cutting priorities, and some of them might have some subnational adaptation priorities as well. Next, please. On the costing side, we know that costing is key because it is essential to define the financial needs and to enable the resource allocation and access to adaptation funding. If you don't know how much your investment is going to cost, it is very unlikely that you are going to ask for the right amount of money. And most of the times what happens is that we are underestimating the costs. So costing adaptation is very important, and we see that in the NAP documents. 37 NAPs include some sort of cost estimates. 16 of them commit to future costing. We see all sorts of challenges due to the lack of maturity of these very high-level adaptation measures, data gaps, the fact of willing to include intangible costs and benefits so that don't have a price in the market, which is adding some complexity to the calculations, lack of technical capacity, etc. But we can also see some examples of countries that are developing tools or approaches. For instance, we developed with Fiji some years ago the NAP costing tool that we have already piloted with 2 other countries, Albania and Pakistan. And it's a very useful tool to help countries identify, estimate the cost of adaptation options. And then Papua New Guinea have developed a step-by-step approach for costing adaptation investment, which is also very interesting to have a look at. Next, please. On the sources of finance, what we see is that there is mention in the NAP documents of all different types of sources of finance possible: domestic finance, national budget, taxes, sovereign bonds, international, of course, the usual suspects like the GCF, the JEF, the multilateral development banks, bilateral donors, etc. The private sector is mentioned in every NAP as a very important actor to engage. But what we see in practice is that they are sort of underutilized, that there's a lack of really concrete actions to engage and to involve private sector in adaptation finance processes. And then national funds that can be considered both as sources of finance and financial instruments are mentioned in 34 NAPs, and we have very prominent examples like Kenya, and we will have an example directly in a moment, Tonga, Antigua, Barbuda, and etc. Something which is very important is when we focus on domestic sources of finance is the need to integrate, to mainstream climate change consideration into national budgets, national budgeting processes, which will help promote more resilient public spending, and also which help identify if there is room for expanding domestic resources for adaptation purposes. And we have a very nice example with Benin that they have developed a step-by-step approach to integrate climate change adaptation into their budgeting process. And also something which is very key and it is starting being mentioned in more and more maps is the climate resilient fiscal planning processes, which is going to help countries understand what would be the potential implication of climate change into their fiscal space and how to make sure that enough and adequate funding is available for long-term adaptation. And we have some interest in examples like in Azerbaijan or in Kiribati. Next, please. On the instruments, we see, of course, traditional financial instruments like grants, loans. We see a lot of instruments like risk transfer mechanisms, but we also notice the mention of different innovative instruments like blended finance using public funding to the risk investment or to leverage external investment, green or blue bonds like in Chile, debt for nature or debt for climate swaps, some specific instruments for ecosystem-based adaptation solutions like payments for ecosystem services are mentioned in 16 maps. Yeah. So we see that overall 39% of the NAP documents highlight the use of innovative financial instruments to fund adaptation. And I will invite you to have a look at the Philippines map because they are exploring a way of having a look at different potential innovative instruments and how they could use them to enhance the, increase the adaptation finance. If we have a look at, if we focus on LDCs, what we see is that they normally mention more traditional finance tools with few NAPs referencing innovative financial instruments like debt for climate or debt for nature swaps or blended finance. Next, please. Some of the barriers that countries have identified in their NAP document to unlocking adaptation finances. First of all, the low awareness and complexity of the procedures to access international public funds. And also the difficulty of turning these high-level adaptation priorities into bankable, concrete projects that are needed to get access to external funding and financing, whether it is a public or a private funding on financing. Also, the limited availability of suitable financing, like longer term, more flexible, lower interest rates would be sort of more suitable for investing in adaptation. And this is this type of more flexible and more suitable financing terms is limited nowadays. Also, the debt situation and limited fiscal space of some countries that are limiting the mobilization of domestic resources for adaptation in some countries, and also finally weak local financing mechanisms that are reducing community ownership and sustainability. Next, please. Some of our key recommendations are, what we can see is that NAP documents still need to, they still have some way to go to be a bit more investment oriented if we want to accelerate the process from planning to implementation. And how we can do that? We can do that by clearly defining the priority adaptation investments, strengthening cost estimates, and funding needs assessment, mapping all potential sources, instruments, financial arrangements, and identifying the most appropriate ones. for each of the aspects of the investment, establishing finance tracking and monitoring system to improve transparency and accountability. We think that these four aspects would help in making NAP documents more investment oriented. Also, something that appeared important to our eyes was the need to tailor adaptation finance strategies to the national context. Sorry. And for instance, selecting appropriate instruments, financial arrangements, sources based on the circumstances and capacities of each countries, promote climate resilience fiscal planning, diversify funding sources beyond international public finance, and encourage, where possible, resource mobilization and private sector engagement through, for instance, incentives or blended finance and guarantees that will be de-risking private sector investment. Next, please. Then one key recommendation for us is the need to reinforce governance and coordination for adaptation finance. The need to mainstream adaptation on to integrate adaptation and existing budgeting systems, but also across all ministries. Empower finance ministries to lead resource mobilization for adaptation and strengthen vertical coordination from the national level to the local level so that the resources are reaching those that need them most. Next, please. When we focus on LDCs, what we can see is that these countries are facing unique constraints. They have limited fiscal space, weak tax systems, high poverty rates, weak financial markets, and this is leading them to be very reliable on external aid. And this is making them very vulnerable to shifts in donor priorities. And this is the situation that we are living now. So grants and flexible concessional loans are most suitable to avoid increasing debt burdens in LDCs. There are some instruments that are could be appropriate for LDCs, like debt for climate swaps that would offer dual solution for both for debt relief and adaptation finance. And of course, what we recommend is a phased approach where we first start with strengthening institutional capacities and skills, strengthening fiscal systems and governance, and then gradually build capacity to mobilize domestic resources and attract private sector investment where possible. Next, please. And finally, I would like to share with you some of our thoughts when we finalize the review. We are aware that to move from planning to implementation, we need to have NAP documents and NAP processes that are more investment oriented. But we wanted to highlight the fact that NAP documents are not investment plans, and NAP processes are not investment planning processes. They are much, much more than that. They are providing the enabling environment that is going to support a dynamic priority-based investment planning. And then within this enabling environment, this iterative investment planning process would be key, where the finance mobilization for adaptation would follow an iterative process through which countries will identify priority investments ready to be implemented in order to increase their resilience to the impacts of climate change. So yeah, this is in a nutshell what the results of the review. I am here to ask any questions or hear any comments from you. Then over to you now, Christian. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maribel. And as Maribel mentioned, we will have lots of time for question and answer. And so please feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat, and we will move to them next. And so next, we're lucky to hear from Thomas Lerenten Lelekoitien, who is Deputy Director for Climate Change Adaptation in the Climate Change Directorate of Kenya's Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Lerenten, can you hear us okay? The floor is over to you.
Thank you, Christian. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Good morning, colleagues. I think Christian has already introduced me, and you can see my name there. It's really my pleasure to share experience of Kenya in terms of how we are financing our national adaptation plan. And I'll share an experience of decentralized climate financing. How do we make sure that funds flow from the national to the subnational level? And this, I'll just limit myself around this because I know already Maribel mentioned the available financial mechanisms globally and private sector and all that. So please, the next slide. Yeah, just as an introduction, as we talk about decentralization of finance, it's just good to mention that Kenya has 47 subnational units. We call them counties. And what you are doing in this system is how do we make sure that money flows from the national to the 47 counties. Next slide, please. Yeah, just some overviews that Kenya was one of the first countries to submit its NAP to the NAP Central. And our NAP is economy-wide. We have all sectors of the economy included, where we identified short-term, long-term, and medium-term priorities to build resilience in those sectors. And it's a 15-year document, 2015-2030, and we are almost towards the tail end of the implementation. And actually, the NAP is the main planning document to guide the national and county governments to prioritize adaptation. And we implement our NAP through the National Climate Change Action Plan. That's a creation of Climate Change Act 2016, where in Section 13 identifies the National Climate Change Action Plan as the main implementation and mainstreaming tool. And it's a 5-year document, so it's shorter than the 30-year document of the NAP. And that we use the National Climate Change Action Plan to implement our long-term planning document as the NAP and also the NDC. So we break the NDC and the NAP into 5 implementation years, and it makes it easy to implement and also to track progress. And the PCRA there is participatory climate risk assessment that we do at the subnational level. The smallest unit, administrative unit in Kenya is the ward. And this is where the participatory climate risk assessment is undertaken. And based on the outcome of the assessment, then the subnational level, the county develops the county climate change action plan. And this action plan is synchronized with the National Climate Change Action Plan, and there's a clear linkage between the County Climate Change Action Plan and the National Climate Change Action Plan. Next slide, please. So I'm going to discuss this system where we decentralize climate finance at the subnational level through what we call County Climate Change Fund. And this County Climate Change Fund is established through regulation legislation at the county level, where the county develops county climate change acts and anchors this fund into the county regulations. So it becomes a main basket for putting climate funds that comes to the county level. So, but now, initially, Kenya did pilot with 5 counties, and now we have been able to upscale this using funding from a program called Financing Locally Led Climate Action, where now we have moved from the 5 counties to all the 47 counties in the country. The next slide, please. So just to deep dive into how this is done, first it's important to mention that the financing locally led climate action is funded by World Bank and governments of Sweden, Denmark, the Kingdom of Netherlands, government of Germany and Kenya. And the funds flow in two main ways. Those stakeholders or partners at the national level, they receive their money through what is called investment project financing, and this is World Bank language. And the counties receive money through what we call performance for results mechanism. So the two levels of government are very important because at the national level, we have the line ministries that actually support counties as they implement their climate change action plans. So these national level partners support counties through capacity development and technical support for them to implement climate action at the county level. And performance for results is where the counties save money. And this is, we call it conditional funds, and they are performance-based. And we do this through what we call DLIs, disbursement-linked indicators. And for FLOCA program, we have two disbursement-linked indicators. One is that the participating counties must meet minimum access conditions for county readiness and institutional support grant. So basically, through the P4R, counties receive money in two ways. There's the readiness, county readiness and institutional support grant that targets the counties, support counties to put in place the right institutional and policy instrument to enable them to implement proper or effective climate action at the subnational level. And then there's the second grant, which is called minimum performance conditions for county climate resilient investment grant. So for the county to get these resources, they must meet these conditions. For the first DLI, that they put in place the right policy or institutional support is there. And secondly, if to get the money to implement the actual actions on the ground, they have to meet specific minimum performance conditions, and they receive a grant called Climate Resilient Investment Grant. So these are the two grants that the subnational level gets. And this DLI, to meet them, you have to meet the conditions I've mentioned. I'm going to mention a few of these conditions. The next slide. Yeah, so to get the county climate institutional support grant, the county must have, they must have a participatory agreement between the National Treasury and the specific governor of the county. The county has opened a special purpose account. And this is very important because we don't want these funds to go and mix up with the other funding streams at the county level. This is a dedicated account to address special actions on climate change. So they just make sure that this transparency, there's a special purpose account where these grants are put. And then the governor must designate a county executive committee member. The structure of the county is that you have the executive and legislation. The executive is where we have the county executive committee, that like the ministers at the county level. So there must be a minister responsible for climate change. And of course, the county must approve the work plan and budget. And this work plan is developed from the participatory risk assessment that was done at the ward level. So for this DLI or for this grant, counties are to get 100,000 USD for 3 years. And this is, as I said, to set up the climate change units that is required under the Climate Change Act in all the counties, so that you have a dedicated unit or a sort of directorate that will coordinate all issues climate change at the county level, develop climate change policies and regulations. You find that all the 47 counties now have county climate change acts, So these funds was to support the counties to do this, and setting up capacity building of the county, because under the County Climate Change Act, we have the institutions created by this instruments. One of them is the World Climate Change Planning Committee. We have the County Climate Change Planning Committees. So this fund is to make sure that all these are in place before now the county can receive investment grants, which is a lot of money to implement the actual investment at the community level. The next slide, please. So the second grant, as I said, is the County Climate Resilient Investment Grant. This is now money that will help implementation of the county action plans at the community level. So, and for the county to get this, they must meet these conditions. One, set aside a minimum of 1.5% of their development budget for climate change. You find that the more the county puts in, the more the money they get. And this is an incentive for counties to put aside money specific for climate change. And from this enticement through this project, you find that counties are putting up to 4% of their budget, dedicating that money to climate change. This is really very, very key in funding climate action at the local level, especially in doing internal resource mobilization, not only waiting for money from outside, but having internal resources, set aside resources from the development budget to address climate change. And then second is to conduct a participatory risk assessment, development of county climate change action plan. All these are some of the conditions that my county must meet to get these resources. And you realize that although there is a basket of resources, but counties receive different accounts depending on how they have met these conditions. And every year, we undertake what's called annual performance assessment. This is very, very important because the Office of the Auditor General goes to every county, and using evidence, they go with the above conditions. They look at your books, the books of account, how much have you set aside for climate change actions. They look at the percentage, and anything above 2% is where the county start getting marks. So a county can set aside 4%, and this is confirmed by the Office of the Auditor General through the looking at the books of the county, confirming that this money was transferred from the main consolidated account of the county level to the special purpose account. So when a county produces evidence and the auditor can see actually the amount was transferred, then you get your marks. And then they look at the participatory risk assessment, where is the report, where is the evidence that it was participatory, list of participants, all that. And then they're going to get some marks. Where is your action plan? So there's a pass mark. So counties, you have to get like 70% of these conditions for them to get the money. So you can see how this project is incentivizing good governance, transparency, apart from just addressing climate change. And this done by the Office of the Auditor General, which is an independent body in government. It's not the project team that does this assessment, not even us at the national level who are part of the implementing entity. No, it's the Auditor General. And this really brings the issue of transparency and really ensure that there's a lot of objectivity into this. So, so far, counties have received the first tranche of investment grant that totaled to 82 million USD. And this is last financial year. And out of this, it's important to note that actually the counties, through incentivization, have put in 24 million. So you can see how we can leverage on the internal resources to address or to fund climate change adaptation. So, and these are not small pocket change. These are a good amount of money that actually help to address climate change adaptation at the local level and implement the NAP. And also important to notice that the highest county received 200, no, around 2 million USD, another, and the list got 416,000 USD. And this is, as I said, is based on how they met those conditions. And you know, it incentivizes counties to improve over time. And currently, there's a second assessment, annual performance assessment report, and counties are expected to get up to 89 million USD for this financial year. That's it, 25, 26. This money actually go directly to implement the county climate change action plan. Unlike these processes that only support counties to develop the action plan, this project goes further to give resources for the implementation. Next slide, please. So a sort of just a vertical integration or the flow of these resources. Of course, you have the UNFCCC that guides whatever we do in the country. And then the Climate Change Act has established a National Climate Change Council chaired by the President, which is the apex policy organ in the country. Then we have the Climate Change Directorate, CCD, which provides the operational coordination. You know, climate change cuts across all the sectors. So it's very important that we have that coordination. And then at the county level, we have county climate change planning committees and that coordinate at the county level. Then we have the World Climate Change Committee, which is the lowest level at the administrative level. So we look at the National Climate Change Council also. One of the role is to ensure that at the national level, we have all the legal and policy instruments in place, including now the Climate Change Act and all these others. The same also is done at the county level by the County Climate Change Planning Committee. So this is just the governance structure on this. The next slide, please. So from the first tranche of the investment grant, actually we found that 80% of the resources went to water. The program was very specific that at least minimum of 20% of the resources must go to water, agriculture, and environment. These are key sectors very important for climate change resilience. So we have new communities that have water. You see solarization of water to reduce emissions of the boreholes. And also what you see there is desalination plant. I think the farthest right picture there. We realize that most of these boreholes, especially in the arid and semi-arid areas, are very salty, and there's need to use technology to desalinate, because you find that that's the only water that's available, and there's a lot of investment that has gone to get that water. So you just add some more money to make sure that the water is fresh and potable for the people. So some of these are just examples. The next slide. So we have some challenges that we have seen so far. Some of them are inadequate capacity. You find that we need a lot of capacity, especially at the climate change units at the county level and world level, for them to articulate effectively and develop these instruments. And then one key area we have been insisting is we want financing locally led climate action to be climate oriented, not development. How do you make sure that this is not a normal development project? And that's why we really anchor this on participatory climate risk. You must be addressing a specific climate-induced risk. And we have even developed some sort of a tool, a screening tool, to make sure that we support counties to focus on climate action and not just the normal development action. Because you realize that most counties are just doing the normal things and the normal development without really ensuring that this is climate induced or smart project. Then sometimes you have poor absorption because of the long procurement processes that are common, I'm sure, across. Then sometimes delay in disbursement of funds, because these funds are disbursed through the normal national disbursement processes. The money must be appropriated by Parliament. And sometimes you find that these other timelines for these other processes affect the implementation of the or disbursement of the funds. And of course, these funds are not enough, and that's why we are continually resource mobilizing so that you have more money to address adaptation. And then the coordination is key at the national and subnational level. And this is areas that we are still improving. Of course, there have been a lot of improvement, but still we are not there. These are continuous processes that we expect over time we're going to make them perfect. The next slide. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much from where I come from, my ethnic group. It has been my pleasure. Back to you, Christian. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lerenten, for that presentation and for the really impressive experience. And obviously, you know, an incredible amount of work has gone into creating that infrastructure and governance structure for climate finance. So we'll now move into a question and answer period. We have about 15 minutes for questions from audience members. And so for the first question, Lerenten, I'd like to please direct this one to you. So the question we received is, what reforms are needed in climate finance access modalities to empower national entities in developing countries to effectively absorb and manage climate finance beyond 2030? Could I pass that one to you to respond to, please?
Thank you very much for that question. I hope I got it right. In terms of the reforms, of course, for those who have been following this space, our president has been really following up on reforms at the international level. We need reforms to make sure that developing countries really access can say quality climate finance, not just loans and more loans, because we're already overburdened by loans. To reform the global climate finance architecture in a way that there's fairness, there's equity, and really a manner that will be more useful to developing countries. But internally, you find that even as a country, when we implemented this decentralized climate finance, you can't say we are already there 100%. There are a few areas that have been a challenge and I've already highlighted in terms of funds flow, because these funds go through the normal government financial management, and the money must be appropriated by the National Assembly, and you have a bicameral parliament. You have the Senate and then the National Assembly, and a few times you have got in between the two houses. Sometimes you don't agree on something in terms of some part of the budget they are appropriating, and the process stalls, and yet you are supposed to implement this project within a certain time. So those are the things you are looking internally to see how we can improve the flow of funds to the counties. And more broadly, we need a lot of reforms around access. How do we make it easy access of money, like even the financial mechanisms, the GCF, adaptation fund, GEF. Many developing countries are really struggling to access this money. Even developing a concept or a proposal requires, a lot of time, quite cumbersome. We need really to improve this to make it easy to access these resources. Maybe Christian, I can stop there.
Thank you so much. No, very helpful reply, and you've covered quite a bit there. So for our next question, I'll pass to Maribel. And so Maribel, our colleague Zipporah from the Commonwealth asks, are there any mechanisms for knowledge exchange and learning across countries and regions in terms of some of the innovative financing strategies for NAPs that you mentioned? And Zipporah was also interested in hearing about experiences from SIDS and LDCs in successfully navigating the complex grant application procedures that Lerenten just referenced. So over to you, Maribel, for those two questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Deborah, for the very interesting question. Yeah, on the first one, yes, absolutely. Here at the NAP Global Network, we have a strong track record of organizing different types of what we call peer learning events at different levels. It could be global level, regional level. It could also be a lighter modality with 2 countries, 3 countries, learning from each other's experiences and sharing challenges and trying to find common solutions, or just learning from each other. So we have done. Christian will have the figure, but yeah, we have a lot of experience with this type of peer learning exchanges, and we see that they are impactful, that they work, and they are very. I think they are suitable and very easy applicable for focusing on adaptation finance. We have developed last year in Zimbabwe a peer learning forum, a global event focusing on planning, on transitioning from planning to implementation, where climate finance and adaptation finance was a key component of this peer learning event. But we have also, just to give you some examples, organized peer learning exchange with Albania and Grenada to discuss costing methodologies. Yeah, so different modalities, and it depends on, of course, as all the work we do is demand driven and tailored to the needs of the countries we support and our country partners. On your second questions about how to better support SIDS and LDCs in navigating this very complex processes for accessing international public finance. I would say that one of the main challenges that we usually see when we support countries accessing finance is the lack of sort of mature adaptation investment. So I think the process of transitioning from sort of a national priority and turning this national priority into an actionable adaptation investment is key, and is something that I think countries would need a bit more support, especially in SIDS and LDCs, in order to have a pipeline of adaptation investment that they could start looking at with a certain degree of maturity that will help them navigate this process, in an easier way. Capacity building, knowing very well which source of funding is more suitable for each investment, I think is also key. And in SIDS, what we see is also sometimes a problem of scale, in the sense of, a small island development state, the investment in one of these islands, maybe they don't comply with the volume of investment that is required when accessing different international public sources of funding, or not requirements, but just only if you have a look at the complexity of the process and the transaction costs, you're not going to go through all the process for submitting a proposal to the GCF for a, let's say, 1 million investment, and this could also be needed in small island development state. And in that case, what we see, sorry, is that countries are looking for more regional and programmatic approaches, and that is helping them sort of structure a strategy which is combining and developing these regional programs to be submitted to this international climate funds in order to have access to this money. And innovation is key. And we see some very interesting examples in seeds. I have in mind now the Antigua and Barbuda SEERF fund, which is using mix of financial instruments to really channel adaptation finance to the ground. So it's complex, and happy to keep on talking about this together. But yes, maybe some thoughts about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Maribel. And so just to bring this panel to a close, Lerenten, I might direct the next reflection to you. And so for colleagues who have joined us here today who want to learn from Kenya's experience on accessing finance for the NAP process, what's one piece of advice you would give to the panel, to the audience members who've joined here today? What's one key takeaway that you would like everyone to leave the webinar with from Kenya's experience on finance for the NAP process? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. One thing, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you loud and clear. Yep.
Yeah, one thing I want to appreciate is that climate finance is one of the biggest challenge for most developing countries. And I don't think I have the silver bullet to address all this. One thing is that, it just requires that become very deliberate and intentional in terms of reaching out to various available climate finance. I know Maribel mentioned the private sector, the financial mechanism, even if philanthropy, all these resources are there. It's just what matters is how you package your priorities. You put them in a way that you can develop investment from that. If it's the NAP, the National Climate Change Action Plan, and for the first time you are doing an investment plan for the action plan, and this now becomes very easy to resource mobilize because you can quickly pick one item and just improve it to get resources. So we have the innovative financial mechanisms. As a country already legislated issues of carbon market that was not legislated before 2023. We put it in our Climate Change Act. We are now having carbon market regulations. And really being aggressive and packaging your priorities in a way that you can entice those people, partners that have money. There's a lot of multilateral engagement. The example of just given financing locally led climate action. You see, we have also some blend of concessional loans and grants that's helping the country to address issues of climate change. So it's just all about also being innovative and making sure that it's not only resources at the national level. How do we make sure that these resources flows to where they're really the most, at the local level where vulnerabilities are very high. So all these are very, very important. I know just giving our experiences doesn't mean that it's perfect, but we're also learning and really looking at avenues to continuously, resource mobilize for adaptation action. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that advice and for those reflections. Maribel, I'll now pass it to you for the last word. And same question, what's one key takeaway or one last reflection you'd like to share with the colleagues who've joined the webinar today on finance for NAP processes? Thanks.
Thank you, Christian. Yeah, so key takeaway. So to me, the key takeaway is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach on adaptation finance. That what we see is that in some countries, due to their national circumstances, a different, probably a phased approach is needed. And we put a lot of emphasis on the need of developing tailored approaches and phased approaches that will enable developing countries, LDCs, adaptation finance, taking into account as I said, their specific circumstances, their level, that levels, their degree of development of their fiscal space and markets and everything. The instruments and even the sources that they are going to mobilize would also have to be very carefully chosen, because in some situations countries are not in a position now to increase their domestic resources for adaptation or to attract private sector investments that see those countries and those markets as the private sector would refer to these countries as markets. They see those markets as very risky markets to invest on. So yeah, this is what I think. I think that a tailored approach, a phased approach is needed. And also I would like to put a strong emphasis on the need, as I think I mentioned before, of translating these very high level adaptation priorities into investment ready adaptation options, into adaptation investments that are impactful, that are economically and financially viable. Because if we want to look for external funding and external financing, you need to demonstrate the financial and the economic viability of these investments, and of course their impact on building resilience and contributing to climate change adaptation. So yeah, so this is, I think, my key takeaway. Let's adapt to the circumstances of each country in the way we unlock and we access to adaptation finance.
Thanks so much, Maribel. So with that, we will close the webinar. A big thanks again to our panelists. And to download the report, Finance for National Adaptation Plan Processes, you can access it through the QR code on the screen or through the link that our colleague Adrian has shared in the chat. Thank you very much again for joining us today. If we didn't get to any of your questions, you can always contact us at the email address on the screen. Please feel free to stay in touch, and thank you so much again for joining us today for this discussion. Take care.
Thank you.